Our first speaker is Brandon Howard. Brandon Howard is a journalist, scholar, and critic whose work re-articulates critical theory and journalism. Growing up in the greater LA area, Brandon was largely drawn to and influenced by the cultural diversity of the region, and naturally took to cultural studies and cinema studies while attending Columbia College, Chicago. His academic work has focused on issues of social justice and personal identity as they are represented and influence various filmic and musical genres. His essays engage a plethora of popular cultural and critical theoretical issues, ranging from gender performance and visual design in popular culture to Karl Marx, from Eminem and Jay-Z to Raymond Williams. Very nice combination there, and Raymond Williams in cultural studies. Brandon's work has appeared in a number of magazines and newspapers, including Streetwise magazine, Do 312, Must See Films, I Paint My Mind, and the Columbia College Chronicle. When not writing, Brandon usually is watching a film, biking, or attending a show around Chicago. And the title of his project is Crossfading from Hierarchy to Heterotopia, the Political Power of Subversive Discourses Within American Music Festivals. In this project, Brandon Howard seeks to reimagine the mainstream music festival as a powerful site where dominant ideologies and issues of privilege can be interrogated, reconfigured, and subverted. Drawing on the work of Michel Foucault and John Kuhn to theorize the space of a music festival, Brandon investigates the ways in which the large-scale American Music Festival, as a unique audio-heterotopian space, generates critical discourses and cultural criticism aimed to deconstruct notions and practices of bro culture and white privilege amongst festival goers. He contends that these discourses and critiques aim to reconfigure, interrogate, and subvert dominant reactionary discourses, behaviors, and practices, and particularly what is wearable and utterable within the festival. Brandon reads these critiques primarily as attempts to deconstruct white privilege, realign notions of cool, and also, and more importantly, effects policy change. Thus contributing, Brandon argues, to the emergence of what he calls alternative models and formations of the music festival. So without further ado, our first speaker, Brandon Howard.
So thank you, Jafar. As Jafar introduced, my project looks at large-scale American music festivals, and I want to preempt this with the fact that in 2015, these large-scale American music festivals aren't necessarily a point for new academic criticism, but my project instead theorizes the space of the festival as a transitory, delimited audio-heterotopia, and how that space lends itself to unique cultural criticism. This unique cultural criticism then produces discourse that has ramifications beyond the festival grounds. So for example, festival goers wearing Native American headdresses has resulted in critics and bloggers taking aim at their use of what they call cultural appropriation, which produces debate over what it means to appropriate in the first place and has actually affected policy change where festivals have outright banned the Native American headdresses. So that's one example of the ways festivals can affect policy change and debate around larger cultural implications of fashion and behavior. But before diving into other specific examples and case studies, I want to first explain my theorization of the space of the festival, as well as how it can be used to describe how I'm going to define discourse. So the term audio-heterotopia is derived from two theories, Michel Foucault's Heterotopia and Josh Kuhn's audio-topia, and both of those ideas stem from the word utopia, wherein the definition of utopia is a place that does not exist. But utopias can exist in the form of heterotopias, which Michel Foucault said are physical manifestations of utopian places, which act as, quote, counter sites within culture, bringing together different aspects of culture where it is, quote, simultaneously represented, contested, and inverted, end quote. Heterotopias are also capable of juxtaposing in a single real place several spaces that are in themselves incompatible, end quote. So just as the festival may be viewed as an orchestrated countersite to the norm of everyday life, whereas the gates around Graham Park segment Lollapalooza off from public space, the advertisement of the space also promotes a counter to daily routine, and in some cases also a reversion to a sense of the tribal, and the festival holds within it aspects of culture who view themselves, their peers, and their reflection. Interestingly enough, Michel Foucault also said the mirror itself is a heterotopian place because it entails at once being in a physical place and seeing yourself where you do not exist, which would be your reflection. And the space of the music festival is the root of why it will hold so much deconstructive power, and it stems from the idea of the mirror. The double space is not just manifested in reflected online virtual videos and blogs after a festival, but also in the refracting of the reflected image, which occurs in cultural criticism all over the internet and websites such as Vice Magazine, Noisy, Consequence of Sound, who filter an image or reflection of a male in a Native American headdress, or groups of men symbolizing all the notions of power, and they filter that through a prism of satire to comment upon what the festival mirrors about dominant American culture. So this already inherently powerful political space of the heterotopia is then exasperated by its obvious affiliation with popular music, which provides the audiotopia. Audiotopia is described by Josh Kuhn as an aural utopian space where the listener is invited to create new social meanings through sound. So this discourse, or way of talking and producing knowledge, is a way of circulating knowledge through language. Michel Foucault said that discourse transmits and produces power. It reinforces it, but also undermines and exposes it. It renders it fragile and makes it possible to thwart it. And as I'll show in a couple of slides, what these websites really do is they represent and post the symbols of power on the website, also trying to subvert it through language of sarcasm and satire. And then Stuart Hall said that discourse is about the production of knowledge through language. And as I argue in my paper, there's 3 levels of discourse that are arising from the audio heterotopia. The first level is the immediate reaction, so blogs, social media, satire, photos. The second level of discourse is obviously arising from the first, and that's a larger dialogue over the implications of fashion and behavior. So discussions about what Native American headdresses and festivals might mean, discussion about what a lack of female representation on the lineups might mean. And the third level of discourse is a combination of 1 and 2, which actually affect policy change and behavior and lend to the rise of alternate festival models, which is the transformational festival. So the space of the audio heterotopia routinely and effectively comments upon bro culture and white privilege as it's seen to be existing in the music festival. So again, festival goers will see their reflection, but they'll see their image refracted back on blogs that night or the next day. And I use the word refraction, defined by Merriam-Webster, as, quote, the action of distorting an image by viewing through a medium. So you can see the image here is distorted, not visually, but verbally, through sarcasm and satire, aimed at images of power and notions of cool. And this form of cultural criticism is comical and happening all over the internet, but that doesn't mean that it's nonetheless political. Kathleen Rowe notes that comedy is, quote, an attack on the law and the father and a drive to level, disrupt, and destroy hierarchy, end quote. So the space of the audio heterotopia, the music festival, sets the terrain for a deconstruction of bro culture, satire being the tool of the deconstruction, which acts to bring low what was high or what was seen to be high. This idea of deconstruction, introduced largely by Jacques Derrida, says that deconstruction in language and theory is a parasitic operation, and it's an ongoing engagement with the terrain in which it takes place. These critics, these bloggers are at the music festival, and they're continually engaged with the festival culture and what that culture might mean for the larger implications of society. But without the mirroring and juxtaposingly seemingly incompatible aspects of the audio heterotopia, you don't have the satirical deconstruction, which is happening, like I said, in plain day and rather mainstream cultural websites and news outlets. The idea of deconstruction then sets the stage for an attempted inversion of power and even an inversion of the philosophy of coolness through blatant mockery. Also keep in mind the etymology of the term bro or brother had African American connotations before the mid-20th century. You bros are the unsung heroes of Coachella. Without you, who would brighten people's day with a clever, ironic t-shirt? How would women be able to dance without the impeding threat of being grinded on? And that image accompanies this article in Vice Magazine. So kind of what's happening here is the binary of cool and uncool as it's seen in culture is slyly being inverted, just as the word bro and brother had been inverted from its original connotations in the mid-20th century. And just as the very concept of cool itself had been inverted from the time when it, quote, developed mainly as a behavioral attitude practiced by black men in the United States at the time of slavery. Cool represents a paradoxical fusion of submission and subversion. It's a classic case of resistance to authority through creativity and innovation. So the philosophy of what it means to be cool is steeped within notions of submission and reversion, not for style, but for survival. And in the same idea, the coolness of satirical discourse, or deconstructive discourse arising from the audio-heterotopia advocates from a freedom of perceived hierarchy and homogeneity while blasting and ridiculing it at the same time. So this satirical cool style of removed cultural critique, in a sense, can resist the authority and the intrusion of power by plastering its symbols on their website and slyly staying detached. This is also exactly what Foucault said heterotopias had the power to do. I'll move back one, where they simultaneously represent culture, contest culture, and invert culture. And then that was just the first level of discourse that I talked about. The second level of discourse, where it starts talking about the larger cultural implications within society, I'll use a case study from Lollapalooza 2014, where Dev Hynes, aka Blood Orange, brought a sense of multiculturalism and progressive identity politics to a set at Lollapalooza that Britt Julius said was patriotic as shit. After Dev Hynes decided to dedicate his set just weeks before what happened in Ferguson, he was wearing a t-shirt with the names Trayvon Martin, Jordan Davis, and Eric Garner. He saw that the power of audio-topia to make a political statement. After he finished a set dedicated to victims of police brutality, he got off stage and tweeted, "They grabbed her and I asked what they were doing, and they grabbed my neck and threw me to the ground, then 2 others joined in on me. I'm in pain, what the fuck? The irony after my t-shirt and message this morning, we are in shock." As soon as he ended this set, he was racially profiled, according to him and according to a lot of reporting on the incident, and was racially profiled at the festival. So this treatment of Hynes recalls notions of white privilege and its inverse racism. As Peggy McIntosh notes, white privilege affords those who are white the ability to, quote, speak in public to a powerful male group without putting my race on trial, end quote, and the privilege to, quote, be in the company of people of my race most of the time, end quote. So these privileges were not afforded to Hynes amidst a mostly white mass music festival in Lollapalooza. But Hynes himself propelled the discourse arising from the incident, where through social media he had the agency and fan base to illuminate on issues of privilege and prejudice, not just at the festival, but within society as a whole. At the festival, I argue that these actions have a discursive microscope, and the mirroring aspects of juxtaposing elements within heterotopia create new social meanings through audiotopia as well. Hynes used the stage as a political platform to deconstruct racism in America during his performance. Then blogs, newspapers, and major news outlets picked up on Hynes' story after the fact, aiding to the discourse created from Blood Orange during his set, and created by Hynes and the attacking security guard after his set. Britt Julius addresses this notion of exclusivity and emphasis on festivals catering to white privilege when she writes, quote, "Perhaps because so many of the mainstream festivals curate lineups that exclude swaths of the population who are largely black, Latino, poor, the gate jumpers, drug abusers, drunken masses I see at summer music festivals are mostly white. The larger and more exclusive music festivals like Lollapalooza, the more likely they are to see incidences in which anyone who doesn't fit the image, white, will be harassed in the name of appearances and prejudice and racism." So unfortunately, Julius's words rang true in the case of Hynes and Lollapalooza, but she is also adding to a discussion about race and privilege into the mainstream cultural lexicon, which arise from the terrain of a very mainstream entertainment destination, which is the American Music Festival. And as I spoke about a little bit earlier, another cultural effect of the heterotopia is its ability to enter a discussion about cultural appropriation more into the public lexicon. So Bear Witness, who's a member of an Ottawa electronic group, A Tribe Called Red, has been especially outspoken about the issue of Native American appropriation as it exists within the cultural festival goers. He said, quote, "You'll see someone wearing a headdress in the same picture as a totem pole and a canoe, when actually those are from 3 different cultures. The totem poles are from the Northwest, headdresses are from the plains, and the kinds of canoes you usually see are woodland canoes. So it's robbing us of our individual cultures." And after he was spoken out about it, festival goers kind of self-policed on social media, talking on forums why cultural appropriation was wrong, and even articles such as "This Means War, why the fashion headdresses must be stopped" appeared in newspapers like The Guardian. And then Bass Coast Music Festival in British Columbia, Glastonbury in the UK, and Tall Tree, also in British Columbia, are 3 music festivals that have done exactly what the form of discourse is called for by banning and restricting Native American headdresses and fashion attire. So as I argue, this policy change is indicative of the discursive power that audio-heterotopian music festivals hold to reimagine and reconfigure the music festival's experience about what you can wear there, but also inform and comment upon the effects of an idea of broke culture and white privilege in society as a whole. Another effect is the rise of popularity of what some call the transformational festival. And as a disclaimer, before I begin talking about these transformational festivals, I'm not positioning these as utopian spaces, wherein utopias are places that don't exist. These obviously are still ticketed festivals and they're put on by promoters, but I'm arguing that these provide alternate festival models to the mainstream American music festival. In 2010, Jeet Kune Loon gave a TED Talk on transformational festivals, saying that they were, quote, a new evolutionary culture with no agreed upon identifiers or labels. And generally, these festivals tend to promote more of a discourse of inclusiveness, environmentalism, and social understanding. At Lightning in a Bottle in Southern California, they have workshops at the festival that include reishi mushroom and spiritual consciousness, gender studies workshops that include the art of healthy feminine leadership, and tantric lap dance sex workshops. And one transformational festival has even been labeled the Anti-Bro Festival by writer Eric Sunderman in Vice magazine, and that one takes place in Iowa City. It's called the Mission Creek Festival. And you can attribute the subcultural convergence to music's function as audio-topia, but also to the way in which the festival space created the physical manifestation of the ideas of audio-topia to create new meanings and new convergencies through sound and through this village space. This and many other transformational festivals produce discourse of inclusiveness, but are born and popularized from a discourse of frustration with the mainstream festival, and as well as discourse of exclusivity that festivals like Lollapalooza promote, by catering to whiteness and efforts to exclude the other. So to conclude, I want to be clear that Foucault said that heterotopias can take various forms and functions within cultures, but in today's society, the music festival is one of the most popular forms of heterotopian space. Their main component is their power of discourse surrounding the music festival after the festival itself. And although these spaces are often branded and corporately sponsored, it's important to understand that these festivals are serious spaces that promote new understandings of the social world, as well as take seriously the satirical discourse that harnesses the power to create new cultural and political meanings through language. The discourse will refract what is occurring culturally within the festival gates, and it's not a wasted effort. The bro-bashing and appropriation-hating words of a democratic blogosphere steep slowly into public ideology, their discourse effective in creating new meanings of the social world for a larger group than just those who attend the music festival. Thank you.